Hello, this is Scott Allen. Welcome to Alpha Anywhere's Q&A and webcast webinar. I am here with Dion McCormick today. We're excited to present some things to you. Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good to hear from you.
Great.
It's been a while, Chris.
So Dion, I am going to make you the panelist and you can take off from here. As a presenter, I should say. Here you go. And you should have control.
And you should be seeing my screen.
I can see your screen and I can hear your voice.
Awesome. Hold on. Just had to cough there. So, hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly webinar. And I want to say thank you so much to the team. Dave's not with us today. He's got some super important, super secret things that are going on that I have no idea what they are. But anyway, I appreciate our associate here helping me out this week. And again, we're here for you. This is about giving you information about the platform, but also more importantly is hopefully trying to answer some of your questions. So if you can do us a favor, and take the time, if you have any questions, put them into the Q&A section or question section of your control panel. We'll be monitoring those very, very closely. And the fake Dave McCormick will be monitoring those. And hopefully we will do our best to try and answer them. If not, we'll take some information and go from there. And also remember, you can always email us at guides@alphasoftware.com. That is a great email to send in requests and information. In fact, this week's webinar, again, is triggered by a question that came in from one of our loyal listeners / Alpha Anywhere developers. And we're going to go ahead and use that information, just kind of flesh out from there. So if you have suggestions for weekly webinars, things that you'd like to cover, let us know and we will jump on that and try and provide that to you. But also do put in your questions you have into here so we can try and answer them. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. This will be a two-parter. Today is the first part. It's kind of like setting the stage, doing some setup pieces. I'm doing it this way just to make sure that we kind of take our time and walk through the individual pieces, answer questions, etc., before trying to cram everything into one session. We just find that tends to be a little bit of a more effective way to manage it, even though you have to wait another week or so to get the second half. But so the first half of this will be showing more setup stuff. Second half will be a little more detailed on how to use it and work with it. So the topic this week is how to use Python with the Alpha Anywhere platform. The Python programming language was recently added as kind of a first-class citizen to Alpha Anywhere in a release a while back. Node.js has been in there for some time because we actually use Node.js for some core features and functionality. But it was a bunch of requests that came in because a lot more people are using Python to implement their solutions. And it's a very widespread language. And in fact, one of the key things Python buys you is its use in data science, but also very exciting more is in the area of AI, large language models. I mean, I'm sure you guys are hearing everything there is about ChatGPT. It's pretty stunning what's going on right now. And what's really cool is Python is a great way for you to integrate those tools because there's an API built into the large language models into ChatGPT. There are expenses, etc. You'll have to go through all that kind of stuff. But in the future, you'll be able to not have to create your own large language model. You'll be able to actually take your data sets and using the APIs, integrate with them. And what I'm finding out there, and it kind of reinforced why we want to work on this today, is the fact that there are a whole bunch of sample Python programs being built and being just published for free to show you how you can simply integrate into ChatGPT with Python. And they're very small, like literally 50 lines of codes, very simple kind of stuff. So what we're finding is because of the prevalence of Python out in the field and its sort of enabled capability within Alpha Anywhere, it's a great combination for you to expand the power of what you do with Alpha and more importantly, increase the capabilities for your current users, but also very, very successful, add new and exciting new capabilities to your systems. So we want to kind of dive in and go through some of the nuts and bolts, show you how to set it up. once you kind of know how to set it up, we'll go into an example, a little more detail of how you then tie that into your UXs and other pieces from there. And that's going to be the subject for today. Excuse me, a couple coughs there. So before I get into that, I just want to do a little level setting that, and this is, I don't know, I believe it's the most popular, but it kind of goes back and forth with JavaScript because JavaScript is so widely used by web developers, designers, etc. But it is it's like either one or two most of the time in terms of what's people doing. And more importantly, it has a huge amount of libraries and modules, i.e. there's an ecosystem around it that you can tap into so you don't have to write the code yourself. And what's very cool with ChatGPT is it can actually write code for you now in Python. Since it's so widely popular, you can go into ChatGPT and say, create me some Python code to do XYZ, and it just generates it. It's pretty amazing what it can do. And in fact, I had to share this. This was really cool. A developer tried it and they said, well, it's an okay program. It's like an inexperienced developer had written the program. So what it did, or what this developer did, is it took that program, it put it into basically what's called the replit, which is how you run a piece of Python code, and it ran it and it found some errors. They took the errors and then went into ChatGPT and said, update your script to correct these errors. It updated the script, put it back into the replit, and it worked. So what you're going to see down the road, and this is going to be very powerful, and again, why I think Python is very interesting and something you should know, is that more and more there's going to be auto generation of code for Python, so that your life becomes easier. You'll take that, use ChatGPT or some other tool like GitHub Copilot that will generate a lot of the core code for you, but then you'll be able to take that into alpha and include that in and expand your capabilities enormously versus having to kind of grunt code all the pieces there. It's very exciting, very interesting what's going on. But beyond that, there's a large pool of experienced developers. So I know a lot of alpha developers kind of are very busy. It's a very popular platform. There is more things to do for your current clients and new clients. So there are a large pool of people you can tap into that have experience with Python to help you develop and do things within it. And as you'll see in a few minutes, there's nice tight integration within the Alpha Anywhere platform. It is a two-way integration, so that what's really cool about it, and we'll talk about this a little bit more next time, but what it allows you to do is Alpha can call out to Python to run some stuff, and then it can get that data back in so you can outline. And Python's a very fast language too. We'll talk a little bit about that. But also there are capabilities for your Python scripts to punch back into Alpha Anywhere to get access to, say, your database connection strings, etc. So that kind of makes life easier, so you have one central point on it. The neat thing about that is that it really allows Python then to have that deep integration to be able to do it. The other thing I found is that Python's like version 3.11. I think the most popular is 09 or 9 or 10 right now. It's like 3.11. But one thing that's cool about Python is that in the last couple generations of the tool or programming language, they've been spending a huge amount of time increasing the speed of the execution of Python. And the main reason why is, again, Python is super powerful and super popular in what's called the data sciences area, where you're manipulating very large data sets, doing analysis, extraction, and that again also is how AI works from the standpoint. You have these very large models that you're manipulating, doing a lot of access to it. So they've increased the speed enormously, and really what's underneath it is really a C program that runs underneath it. And in that, you get the benefit, because XBasic, I love XBasic. I breathe XBasic. I use XBasic every day. It's such a great language. And you'll find if you haven't done Python, it's actually a pretty simple jump from Alpha to Python. There's a lot of similarities. You have to get around to certain things, but you'll find that you'll be able to adopt and be able to write your own Python scripts, especially with something like ChatGPT, writing a base script for you to check out. I am so sorry. I have a frog in my throat today. But the other thing that's really cool is that so you may have some slow moving kind of XBasic stuff that you've done, because XBasic is an interpreted language. In fact, Python is also an interpreted language. It's not compiled, but because Python has done a lot of enhancements to the core sort of interpreter that runs it, what you'll find is often Python can actually execute very large sort of recursive scripts in a much faster manner than XBasic. And it's nothing against XBasic. It's just you have this teams from around the world that are spending their time enhancing the Python platform to do that. So that's why I wanted to share with you that not only does Alpha Anywhere Python improve your ability to add features and capabilities, but in terms of existing capabilities, you may be able to accelerate how it works very quickly by just adding some small scripts of Python to do maybe recursive or kind of redundant efforts from there. So those are some little tidbits about it, worth the effort to look into it. Again, Python is a very approachable language. I wouldn't worry about it. You're going to be able to embrace it very quickly. If you've been doing XBasic, it's a little different dialect, a little different structure, but you have functions and returns and all these kind of things. Basically, most of it you're going to love. It's really cool from there. So again, today we're going to go ahead and dive in and set up my environment for Python. And we're also going to show you how what's really nice, as usual with Alpha, which I love these guys, is that it actually gives you some demo scripts and other stuff like that, so you can kind of use it and understand how to develop with it. So with that, I'll pop over there. First, remember, if you have any questions, put them into the Q&A section on the GoToWebinar control panel. We will do our best to answer those. And please ask us questions. So I'm going to go ahead and pop. Okay, so I am in my Alpha development environment. I created a new workspace. So just to put all my information in there. And this is fresh and brand new. So I haven't done anything. So I want to walk you through it. So you'll notice on the left-hand side in our control panel, our web projects control panel, you have our traditional ones, but you'll notice there's always been this one here called Node. And again, if you guys know JavaScript, Node may be the better way to go. Python's just an alternative to it. And Node's really cool because it's super duper fast. It's the Node engine is built by really Google, and it flies. And Node has a whole bunch of examples of stuff out there. But Node has been in there for a while. They added Python after it, but you'll notice that there's nothing that says Python in this project right now. So in order to use Python with the Alpha Anywhere, you have your first step where you go up to Tools. And then if you come down here, you're going to see on the Tools menu towards the end, you have two kind of sub-menus, Node and Python. Now, a little bit background, and again, I don't want to bore you to death, but I kind of wanted you to understand how things are using it. So basically, these are two other programming languages, and they have their own engine. So Node is installed on your system. So one thing that's important for you to know is that when you install Alpha, Alpha will take care of installing Node and Python for you, both on your development machine and on your server, which is nice because then you don't have to worry about the stuff. So the cool thing about that is that a lot of that's already done, so you can immediately start using it. And so in the case of Node, you'll see you can control things like restarting the core engine, start and stop things, put etc. Here with Python, you'll see right now that since I don't have anything over here, it has a menu item here called Create a Python Folder in Web Project. And so that's your first step, is you want to go ahead and go to Python on the Tools menu and go create a Python folder. And it's going to ask you a question. It's going to say it's going to add that folder to the left-hand menu and also to your project there. But it's also asking you, would you like to add a sample Python module to folder? And I would say yes. What a module is, just to let you know, well, I'll show you in a moment, but it's just a file with some Python code in it. And that's the neat thing, is you can break all your Python code into multiple modules. We will talk about importing modules in there. So I'm going to go Python webinar is my module name. You can name it anything you want. Or in fact, you know what? I'm going to call this sample is going to be, just so that I know it's my sample code. And what will happen is it's going to create my folder, and it's going to also create this pre-made script for you. And you'll see this across alphas. Like when you create an XBasic script, like an XBasic callback, or you create a new UX, the alpha is really good about providing a whole bunch of sample code, so you don't have to kind of then go to a manual. You can actually look at the code right there and start understanding and using it. So I'm just going to say yes to would you like to add a sample, and I'm going to click sample and create folder. Okay, So you'll notice now, and let me go back here. I think it needs to be refreshed. Let's go ahead and go back into the web projects folder. Where'd that folder go? Yeah, it did create it. I'm sorry, it doesn't create a dedicated, but it does create a Python folder for you on there. And if I go ahead and open this up, basically this little folder right there will open up where this project is at. You're going to see there's nothing in my project except this Python folder in my project. So here is my project. It's in the web projects, default web project, Python there. And if I go into Python, you'll see that it put a sample file in there for me to use. So that's where it is. So it basically created a Python folder, and then inside there created a Python code. Now, very important for you to understand that this is, again, straight Python, and I'll show you this script in a few moments. So there isn't a Python editor runtime inside of Alpha. You can edit the product inside of Alpha, but you can then now use anything to edit that. You can use, for instance, you could actually open it up, and I'm just right-clicking on the file, and I'm going to edit it with Notepad++, which I think a lot of people use. So you can see I'm in Notepad++. I've opened this file here. I could edit it here, save it, and then it saves it into this folder here. Alternatively, you could use Visual Studio, which is a much more robust Python environment. It's got a debugger and everything else there. So it's up to you. It depends. I mean, the more complex you make your scripts, the more you may want to decide to use the Visual Code or Visual Editor, or you can just, I mean, a lot of times for a simple kind of code, you just need a text editor to edit it. And from within there, you'll be able to go. So again, step one, add your Python folder, and then it will then, if you ask it, create that there. So let's go ahead and real quick, let's go ahead and I'm going to double click in there, and you'll see there's my sample py, and .py is the standard end of the file name, so it knows it's a Python file. By the way, I can click in here and click edit, and I don't know if that does anything. Oh, it doesn't do anything. You kind of have to, you can open it with, and this is the way you do it there, and you can choose a program. So when I'm here, you notice that I opened up the folder, then I went in here and I right click and said edit with Notepad++. I don't have to do all that. I can just go into the Alpha, right click and say open with, and the default is Notepad, and that's just built-in Notepad. I highly suggest that you do download, if you don't have it, Notepad++, because it's got some nice color focus, and it's just a much more robust editor, etc. If you want to, also just let you know, is I can choose a program and I can add a new program, and I can either say just use the Windows default for this, or add my new program, so I can actually say Visual Studio, up to you, and then you'll pick where that program is. So if you have a favorite editor like Sublime, well, let's say I don't think that works on Windows, but some other editor that you've been using for a long time, add it in. You just say, add a new program. It'll ask you to find that program on your hard drive, select it, that exe, and now you're good to go, and you can use that. And from that standpoint there. So step one, create your Python file or Python folder, add that in. Step two, take the time to create a sample so you can use that to kind of get your head around it. And then step three, you can start editing it. Now, again, you can then just, if you want to run that Python file, you can just run Python on your local machine and run it. So we can actually look at that kind of things there. But let's go ahead and open it up and look at here. And we'll see that we have a function in here. And you'll notice it created a sample function here. Okay, and most of it is commented out. So in Python, the comment out is the £. So that means comment. So you can see it's highlighted in green, and so it's showing you not do that. Now, you'll notice these two statements right here are called import. I'm going to come back and talk about those a little bit more, that are super important, but it gives you some example of how it works. You can see the language looks very similar to Alpha, although the if are a little different, etc. So what I want to do is I'm going to modify this. When you call this function, it's going to call this function, and then I want it to return a value. So often that's what you'll do, is you'll create a module that you call it, it does some stuff, and then it returns some information. So I'm just going to go down here, and I'm going to take out this comment here, and I'm going to say, after this function runs, let's return hello world. And that's all you need to do. Now, when I save this, it is saving it right into this folder, into this. So I can keep this open. That's kind of one of the nice things is I can now keep this open on another screen, etc., and be able to do that. Sorry for the interruption. Let's turn this. Sorry. Excuse me. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So that's kind of nice is you can have your editor open, be able to modify it and rerun it in here. So this is a very simple program that basically runs this function and then returns a static PS text. So, well, how do I run that? Well, one is I could run that using Python there, but maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I just want to try it from Alpha. So built into Alpha is a special command from XBasic. And this is where if you're using XBasic, you're going to love it because you can mix and match the things together. So I'm going to go into XBasic and I don't have anything running here. So I'm going to click new. And by the way, I'm going to show you in the script here because that's kind of a handy tool for there. Next time we'll talk about how you can call these functions from your UXs, which is super powerful because then you can obviously tie these things into it. So I'm going to create a new basic script and I'm going to call this. This is where you're going to get used to like switching gears quickly. So I'm going to go test Python script. Okay. There we go, there. Now I can then, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go over here and I'm going to go to here and I'm going to go into my alpha because I wanna make my life easier. And I'm just gonna type Python into our handy dandy documentation system. In a moment, it will find Python integrations and it'll tell you how to do that. And again, these scripts can be standalone. It could be anything you want. Okay, so you can see, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this page right here. And I'm going to put it into the chat window. If you'd like to go check it out, you're welcome to do so. So I'm going to start with calling Python from XBasic, and it says basically how do you call it from there. And you can see this was released in 4.6.3.8 plus. Okay, so let's go ahead and go down here. And you can see I'm going to say calling Python and XBasic callback. Now, this would be normally called when you do a, excuse me, would be called like from an AJAX callback. So you'd normally do this here. So I'm going to alter it a little bit, and then we'll be able to do that. So let's see. Okay. My XBasic helper Python, make sure. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. And this is the function, this is showing you here, this is the Python, similar to what we have. And this is the XBasic you will run to basically execute that. So I'm just gonna copy this in real quick. Okay, copy that. I'm gonna go back in here. I'm gonna paste that. And we'll walk through that, okay? And I'm gonna just change this real quick. I'm gonna go Showbar. Okay. Now, again, I'm showing you, you know what? Let me think about this real quick. I'm going to stay it here and we'll just do it here. It's a little different. And the reason why is these things exist before. So, okay, so let me walk you through the script and then we'll run it really quick. So the first thing it does is it calls this helper function to reload the module. Once your testing is done and you've done everything, you can comment this out before you send it to your server. And the reason why is once a Python module is loaded, it's then sort of in memory. It's sort of like XBasic classes. And so you don't have to reload it. And that actually takes a few moments. So over time, it's actually going to increase or, cause a little time for the server to work. So you definitely, but when you're developing, the idea is every time I run this script, I want to kind of have it read the file because I might have changed the file when I'm doing some changes. Let's say I go in and change hello world to something else. Well, if I don't call this when I'm doing testing, it will then, just use the previous one that it loaded in there. Now, you'll see that this is your important function right here. Basically, it says return value, so whatever comes back, helper call. Now, what in here is the following. First, it's asking for the module, then the function, and then it's passing in these arguments here. Okay, so let me go back to our function real quick. So you can see that I have a function in my module called sample.py called function1. And that means what's cool is you can have as many functions as you want, within this file. So you're not limited to a single function in a module. You can have multiple ones from there. And very importantly, modules can call other modules. You can install third-party modules. You can go all those things there. Now you'll notice that when it calls, it's going to go first sample. That's the name of my module. So that's the name of the file in, I go here. That's the name of the file. Notice it doesn't have the .py. It just wants that name there. The function is the function within that module. So if I go back here and I call this and say function 1, go here, that's just function 1 here. Now you notice that it requires these 3 things here. Now these are here because when you do an XBasic callback, Alpha will automatically load these things. So for instance, E has all the information about the UX, like what the value of the fields are. Session are obviously session variables, and request is also handy because it gives you like when the UX was loaded. But the problem is when I run them here, it's going to give me an error because these don't exist. So I'm just going to cheat. I'm going to go E is equal to there, session is equal to, and that's just because I'm running it in the script editor here. If I were running this in XBasic callback, which we'll show you next time, you wouldn't have to change it. Just leave it as it is. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to call this Python test. That's an XBasic script. And I'm going to go ahead and go debug so we can walk right through it. Okay, so quick recap, just copy and paste the script. You put in what module you want, what function you want within that module, and then pass them in these standard format or standard variables. If you don't have them, you can just, for testing purposes, you can just make them empty so it doesn't say, hey, that variable doesn't exist. So let's give it a try. So when I run through this, the first thing it's going to do is when I step it, Alpha has basically gone out to the file system. Ooh, I have a problem. Notice my module name is my Python. In fact, this, if I put a, well, let's show you there just to see. I'm going to say load result is equal to, and let's rerun this, and let's see what happens when I go here. You'll notice that, oh, it doesn't give me anything. It should say false, but it doesn't give me any value to it because it can't find my Python. So that's a mistake on my part. So let's go ahead here and put in, we want to load sample. And again, this is only when you're doing development. Once you're done, you can just comment it out, and then you don't have to worry about that when you're running it in production. So let's go ahead and start that. It loads that. Now I'm getting a return value. I'm going to go set those values. Okay, so I'm here. So now remember what this does is it's basically going to punch out, call into here, run this function, and whatever I return is going to put it into return value. So let's do it and see what happens. Okay, so now if I look at return value, voila, hello world. And if we look at our script, and this is, by the way, why I like having the script open in a different window here, you can see that was my message, hello world. And I could have done a ton of stuff. I could have made database queries. I could return JSON. I could return anything you want. It's just saying, hey, what return does in a Python function is basically whoever calls that function, it's going to return that value. Very similar, identical to how XBasic works. So it's pretty straight value. And then the Showbar, basically all that does is it, let's go back here. It just shows that variable in a pop-up window here. So let's say I go, oh, you know what? I really don't want hello world as my response. I go into here. I go hello webinar. I save this file. And then when I rerun this, remember, first thing it's going to do is, since I've changed it, if I didn't do this, it would say hello world, but now it does, it will reload that. So it takes that fresh code, brings it in. And as you can see, it's very fast. It's basically just reading it from the disk. But the reason we encourage you not to do it in production on your live servers is that if you have like 100 people hitting it, you just constantly reload that thing and there's no reason to do it. You load it once and it's in the system there. Okay, go from there, boom. And you'll notice, there it is. There's my new value because it loaded my function out of the sample, ran it, and gave me that volume back from there. Very cool, huh? So very straightforward to integrate. Now you're off to the races. Once you know this basic concept, and we'll talk about doing it with and talking a few other things, you now have the ability to write your programs and bring them in here. So that's all. You're like, well, why didn't I just do that next basic, Dan? That's like really simple. Well, again, as I mentioned, Python has Python. pip there are, and let me go ahead and try and find it here, PY. And we're going to show you how to bring in these modules. There's a built-in way to do it. You can either do it manually, but you'll see that this is like the industry standard place to go find modules, which is basically code that other people have put together. As you can see, there's 440,000 projects, 7.8 million files, I mean, this is the real deal. I mean, you have everybody over in the world that are trying to do stuff. And so you can see, you can search for a project. Let's say I want to work with ChatGPT. Okay. And I can't do it today. I don't have it there. But you notice there's all these different ChatGPT modules that you can download. And like this person, I mean, this stuff is going so quick, you got to be careful. But you can basically download these sample codes, and it will allow you to bring down that code and install it on it. Some are very rich, some have all this data. But like, let's find something a little more interesting. Let's say something like S3. Let's say you wanted to talk to S3 and do S3 manipulation. You can in XBasic, by the way, but you can now download these AWS 3 tools. And again, lots of good documentation on it. Basically, you could put this in here, shows you a little stuff, and then you can run these things to list S3 buckets, get it there. And you don't have to write all that code. Basically, they've written it for you. It will download into your environment. You can see, and I'll show you how to do an example of this next time. And then all you do is you say import that. And we'll talk about that. But if objects exist, then print that. If not, really simple. So, and you can also find like, let's see, Python program for, let's call it Python program for prime numbers. Okay, like for whatever reason you might need a program, you can check a prime number here, and you go right here, and then you'll see there's a ton of. Here you go. This is it. So you can just literally, sorry, there's all these ads. You can literally grab and copy this information out. Let's go ahead and try that. I'm just going to grab this code out. Okay. And I'm going to go into, actually, you know what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to go def webinar prime number. And I want to use the same setting here. So e comma session comma request. Okay. So I've defined these are functions. Now I'm going to paste that information in there. Okay. And notice I had to indent it. That's one thing you'll learn a lot about. And I want to do is I want to say return. I'm sorry, I should have done this ahead of time, but you're seeing real time. And then we can say return. Okay. So let's go ahead and save this. So we've now saved this. So I'm going to copy that. And this may not work. I'm just flying without, wheel for right now. But let's go ahead and instead of this one, let's go ahead and copy this. And I'm going to say, it's still the sample function, but we have a new function name. So that function name is there. Okay. I'm going to pass it in the same stuff. Let's give it a try and see what happens. See if I did it okay. Okay. Very interesting. Check this out. And this is another kind of why I wanted to kind of do this, fly without there. You'll notice something. When it ran that Python program, it said, oh, I'm sorry. It gives you the error. So basically, Python ran that program. It found an error. It spit that error out. Alpha captured that error and let you know what that error is. So you can see that I'm saying unsupported operating types, and you have to kind of put your head on, saying int string. I know, okay, so great. So I know that I screwed that up. So if I go back and look at my Python, num is a number, this is text. So I can just say, and I think it's, again, it's where you look there, Python convert num to string. As you can see, there's tons of stuff like there. I think it's string built, okay? Yeah, just say string enter value. So I'll go back to my program. I'm going to say string. So now it's going to do a string. And I love the fact, otherwise, if they hadn't have done that, then I would have never, it just would have said, I don't know what's going on. So it's really cool that Alpha takes the time to get that error and send it back to you. Often you'll use something like Visual Studio to get your code all ready because it has breakpoints and all the traditional stuff there, and then you just copy it in. But for simple scripts like this, there's no reason to have to go do that. You can do it all inside Alpha. And the reality is probably 80% of your scripts are going to be very small, short scripts doing stuff. So you won't need to do tons for it because there's, again, all these modules are built. You're just writing a little piece of code. So let's try this real quick. Okay. And return value. Okay. 29 is a prime number. So you can see it ran that script and it returned, in our case, it said, yeah, it is, or it's this. So it's prime. Now, this number is hard coded. So let's go ahead and run here. So there's a couple ways you can do this, and I just wanted to show you that. Okay. So first, we can say num is equal to, and let's put 29 in there, and then I can actually add my own values here. So that's method number 1. So I created a number here, and I'm passing it in there. Okay. Now, important though, is in here, I'm not setting that num, so I just go here to the function and say num. So now when I pull it in, I'll just go ahead and comment that out. Okay. Save it. Boom. Now when I run this, that number is now dynamic. Oh, okay. So it wants this num as an integer. So let's go ahead and halt that. And this is where I sorry, should know about that. Let's see, it wanted that as an integer. It has to be, it's doing it as a float. So, oh, I know how to do this. I can just say, I believe I can just go num is equal to int, and I'm running, okay. So I'm just converting it into an integer inside here. I would normally do that in XBasic. And again, I'm just making this stuff up, guys. So hope you don't mind. But as you can see, the built-in support. So let's go. Okay. Yes, 29 is a prime number. So I'm going to halt this. I'm going to go ahead and change this to 3. Let's run it. Yep, 3 is a prime number. Let's try 4 and run that. It's not a prime number. So my system is running right now. And so that's working pretty good there. So as you can see, I wrote in this code, I ended up writing 2 pieces of line. The rest was already just ready to go. So I didn't have to do all that. So, and the cool thing is there's a billion Python scripts out there. And if it's something super complicated, you go on Fiverr, you go on Upwork, you hire someone, boom, they can write that stuff for you. You drop it in, plug it into here, you're done. It's a super enabler for you and your team there. So I'm going to halt at this point because I wanted to basically show you how to set it up, how to integrate it. Next time, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take it into into Ajax callbacks and show you how you, in the UX, we can actually create a UX that you enter the number, it calls back, calls Python, returns the data. So you can see that progress there. One last note on this, which is there, is that I created a special num for it. I could have easily done this. I could have said, like, gotten rid of session, and I could have gone session.num is equal to 4. And then inside of my script, I could have gone in here and said it's session.num, and that way I can get it there. So normally I kind of, I wanted to make a specific variable for this purposes here, but often you'll have stuff in session variables and you can just set it into that session variable, pass it in, and then it uses that. So you don't have to add your own stuff. You can just kind of add a bunch of stuff to session, but you're gonna have to know that. This is a little more self-documenting, but that's another method to do it from there. So I'd like to go ahead and stop and see if there's any questions that people may have. on what I've shown. And again, next time around, we're going to actually create a UX. We're going to load up. We're going to call the Python and do all that and leverage really the rest of this information here, which I think you'll really, really like.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Dion.
Yeah.
We do have some questions, and specifically related to the Python stuff. We had a couple, and one was asking if is there anything that needed to be loaded on the application server, non-IIS, in order to be able to use Python?
Good question, and the answer is no. The only thing you're going to want to do is check your version of Python, and I'm not sure which one I'll have to check with Alpha on that. But if we go in here and I go into my program files, I think it's 86. Let's go back. Yeah. I'm in here where my app server is installed, and Alpha actually installs the Python. It installs Node for you. And Python, let's go here. Actually, I'll have to, you know what? Maybe I do. I shouldn't say that out of thing here. Here's Python. So it has, when it installs, I believe it automatically installs it. I have an old version of the app server on my local, this is my development machine. But you notice when I install the developer environment, in that folder where it installs, it adds Python. And in here, it's putting, in this case, 3.9.2. That's the version of it. And then you can see there are a bunch of other little modules that Alpha has provided, and those get automatically loaded. And we'll talk about a little bit more as this allows you to then say, call back and read a database from Alpha and do some other cool stuff from there and generate PDFs. There's some really neat things here. But in this case, therefore, it's 3.9.2. I believe, and I'll double check that it is installed when you install the system. I mean, Python is a free open source tool. That is important for you to know, and I want to take one moment to talk about that. You'll notice that when I installed this version of Alpha, it installed the 3.9.2, which is a very safe version. But they're now on 3.11, 3.10 and 3.11 have been the latest point releases that they've done for Python. So when you're out there, you may need to make sure that any specific Python script, if it requires a certain version, you may want to just double check against what's installed on your machines. That way you don't get into a problem where it tries to run and says, sorry, I can't do that. There are some sensitivities around that, but if you're using plain vanilla Python without a lot of fancy stuff, the installed version is pretty good. The only other element of that is that the 3.11 version is much, much faster. So if you are doing some compute intensive stuff or doing something more intensive, you may want to see it upgrading to that. And that's pretty straightforward. Actually, you can upgrade that on the system here. So let's go back here. Let's go to Python download. Okay. And if you go to the Python website, which is just python.org, right here. Let's copy that. Okay. As you can see, here's the history of it. So we're a couple back. You're welcome to download the I would be careful about the latest because obviously it's still being used, but you can download that. The important thing you want to do is when you download it and you install it, like let's go ahead and do this real quick. And I'm not going to fully install it, but I'm going to download the exe. Okay. When I open it here and start running it, wait, maybe it's another, see? Make sure you run as administrator. You'll notice that this is where it's going to show you right now. It's going to try and install it in a standard location under your user. You're going to want to click customize and go through the customize step and make sure you point the install to be in this location right here. And I'll double check with the team just to make sure that's the proper process for doing it. But you definitely want to make sure that it gets installed in this folder here so that it works, that Alpha knows where it is and uses it because Alpha, and also most importantly is if you install it on your dev machine, make sure you update your server so they're in sync so you don't run into any kind of weird things here. But before our next time, I'll double check saying, hey, what is the process for upgrading it? Let's see, actually, maybe there is, I don't know if there is. There's debugging, it shows you that, some videos to walk you through. I'll find out like what is the standard way to install and upgrade a Python. and I haven't installed Alpha on this particular machine for a while, so they may be continually upgrading which Python it installs. So again, all you need to do is go find where your program has been installed. So like in this case, my Alpha Anywhere development was in my program files. You'll see the same thing in the server. If I go up, you'll see, and I don't run a server on here, but we would go into A512 app server. And then in here, you'd see Python and you'd see that folder here. You want to make sure you install both in both locations. But I'll find if there's a documentation around on upgrading Python, because that is important. Because again, the new one's much faster. They basically went into the C code and optimized a bunch of stuff, so it really runs lightning fast. Reality is you may not, if you're not doing something really big, it may not make a big difference, but it's something to be aware of. So we'll find that out. Cool. Sorry, I know that was a long answer, but I appreciate the call.
Well, in the process, I think you answered one other question, which I think was essentially asking that is that does Alpha install Python in a separate location or overwrite your existing location? And I think we've just proven that it installs in a separate location inside your Alpha folder.
Correct. So you want to check versions for sure.
Right. And then there was a question about whether or not it's a part of Community Edition.
I don't know. I'd have to check. I don't know that off the top of my head. That's a good question. I think it is because it's open source and we try to maintain commonality. But I would have to double check.
I would think so. Let's see. How would you check for Python version on Alpha Cloud? Don't know. Do you?
Well, that's a good point. I believe it matches what your local is, but I'd have to go on. See if I can get in there. I haven't seen that. Oh, you know what? Usually, hold on a second. Let's go to project properties. Let's see if it's on project properties. Alpha Cloud tends to do that. Use that. There's JavaScript libraries, dates. So many settings. Yeah, I'd have to find that out. Yeah, it'd have to be maybe in the publishing profile. Let's go to profile. Oh, I don't have any profiles, but if I create a new profile, that might be where it is. But okay, so the notes are, let me write this down. One is install update proper process, Python process. And two is specify Alpha Cloud. Both very good questions because, you know, maintaining version compatibility is a good way to make your life simpler and not have to debug weird stuff. Again, if you're doing plain vanilla Python stuff, it's usually, you know, like the script I showed you right here, that's going to work the same way on 9, 10, 11, etc. But if it does do something a little more modern and stuff, there's some new language changes, you may run into something there. So it's always good to know. So good questions. I appreciate people bringing that up.
Great. Well, we're coming toward the end of our questions, I think. Yeah. So
cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Well, what we'll do is, again, next time we'll focus on setting up our XBasic, callbacks and showing you how to integrate it with the UX, which is really, really powerful. And I think you're gonna have a lot of fun with it. It's really, really neat.
Awesome. Well, great. We'll wrap it up here then, and hopefully we'll see you all next week. And Dion, we look forward to that next presentation.
Yep. And if you have questions that didn't come up here, send them to guides@alphasoftware.com so we can have that information.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and we'll hope.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye, everybody.